Well, good afternoon. I hope you all had a nice lunch, and welcome back to the second panel of the day, focusing on retirement savings and moderated by Kathleen Kennedy Townsend. Kathleen is the Secretary's representative on pensions and retirement at the Department of Labor, where she is leading the retirement campaign for President Joe Biden and Secretary Marty Walsh. Previously, she was the Director of Retirement Security at the Economic Policy Institute, and she founded the Center for Retirement Initiatives at Georgetown University. She was chair of the task force that created the Secure Choice legislation in Maryland and served on the board of Maryland Saves, implementing the legislation for the state retirement savings program. I might also add that Kathleen was also Maryland's first woman lieutenant governor. This is the 10th state roundtable convened under her leadership, and we're honored to be a part of this important national conversation. The retirement savings challenges that we will discuss today are not new. They've only become more pressing as time has passed. I think I mentioned this morning that in 2014, before I left the Senate, I had introduced a bill called USA Retirement, which stands for Universal, Secure, and Adaptable. So it could be adapted by different sizes of businesses and would provide for a lifetime stream of income. Well, quite frankly, the federal government hasn't done much in this area since that time, and so the states have stepped up, and they're setting up automatic IRA programs for those who do not have access through their employer. There's also a new portability initiative that Michael Krebs will discuss today. Again, I'd like to thank all panelists for their participation as well as for their work on these important issues. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to the person who has been leading this effort nationally, Kathleen Kennedy Townsend.
Senator. Well, Senator, I am thrilled to be with you because you've been fighting for strengthening Social Security throughout your career. You've done such an extraordinary job. And you did introduce the savings, the USA Savings, which launched the initial discussion about auto IRAs. You're right, the federal government didn't go forward, but states followed your lead. And eventually, I think that because what the states have done, eventually the federal government will act because the states will each have their particular piece of legislation, and the financial firms will get tired of having to comply with one piece of law in every different states and saying, just like ERISA, we want a law that is uniform across all the states. So you are an innovator. You are thoughtful, you're fighting for working people, and I love being in this one. For those who are just listening, you should come and visit the Harkin Institute because it is a terrific institute for people with disabilities. It is the most innovative architecture I've ever seen for those who need to have issues, whatever they are, because it's so kind and open. So congratulations. You don't just talk, you do. So congratulations. And I'm so glad you spoke so well about and so eloquently about the defined benefit plan. That really offered a way for people with third or fourth grade education to be able to save, to retire, to not worry how long they're going to live, and to have a retirement plan for as long as they did live, so on top of their Social Security payments. Now we don't have that anymore for most Americans. And so what President Biden and Secretary Walsh has asked me to do is to figure out how we can make the defined contribution plan, make it easier to get a retirement plan, easier to take your retirement plan from job to job, and easier once you do retire, to have a lifetime income. And that's what we're going to talk about today. And I'm lucky enough to have 4 fabulous panelists. One is Kim Olson, who helped to get the Oregon IRA plan off the ground, which is the first one that's really gotten their act together. And she now works with Pew to help other states also get their act together. We're going to talk with Michael Krebs, who, as you know, was lucky enough to work for you, Senator, and has imbibed all your great values and now works for the Groom Law Firm, is really doing a terrific job on the portability issue. We also have 2 people on the screen, as you can see. Susan Lenzisk. Susan, do you want to pronounce your last name?
Lencheski.
Thank you, Susan. I should be able to do that, but I can't. Who's from the state of Minnesota, who's actually thinking about enacting an auto IRA plan. We'll hear from you. And we also have Mark Shemdab from the Society of Actuaries, who is a fellow, who's very innovative about what should be done for lifetime income. And every time I talk with him, he gives me yet another idea about what we should do. So I look forward to talking to you soon and hearing from you. And I hope we'll have time at the end of this presentation to get some questions from the audience. But let's start off with you, Kim. What are the challenges? You know, we've heard only half of all Americans have retirement. That means half don't. And it's one of the things that Americans are most worried about. So why are they so worried? And what can be done about this?
Sure. Well, first, thank you to the Harkin Institute, to Senator Harkin for having us here. As noted, I'm from the Pew Charitable Trust, and we've been doing a lot of research at the Trust on this issue of lack of access to retirement savings in the private sector workforce in the United States. So what we know is that about 57 million Americans in the private sector do not have access to retirement savings at work. And this is extremely problematic because we're also aware from research from the AARP Public Policy Institute that people are 15 times more likely to save for retirement if they're doing it at work through payroll deduction. So not having that, just the access, the ability to save at work is a huge impediment to retirement savings for millions and millions of Americans across the country. So what can we do about that? And I'll kind of go into what the states have been doing. Now, obviously, Senator Harkin had a great idea to do this nationwide. This did not work for many political reasons, but the states have decided to go ahead and try this on their own. So what they're doing is creating what we call automatic IRAs or automated savings programs. Some call them Work and Save or Secure Choice. But what they are is basically just saying, the state makes a public-private partnership with a program administrator and an investment manager to create this a program for private sector workers to have the ability to save through payroll deduction. This is great for employees, it's great for employers, and it's great for taxpayers. And I'll outline all 3 of those. So for employers, this allows especially small businesses who have until now not been able to offer a retirement benefit to their employees, the ability to do that. So they can compete with larger businesses who already are able to offer those because maybe they have the time, ability, the HR, the resources to do that. So it gives the employer the ability to compete. For the employee, it gives them that access. It allows them to automatically save. And what's great about the way the programs are created is that they have very well-defined defaults. So people are automated in. They save at a certain rate. Most states are choosing 5% that goes up over the course of time, usually to 8 or 10%. So all of this is happening automatically, and they're able to be saving without even thinking about it. And then on the taxpayer side, these plans create a savings base for the rest of the population who haven't been able to save. And we're going to see the fiscal impact on the state reduced on the stress and strain on the social safety net when we get to the retirement age for people who are finally able to save for themselves and maybe have an extended bridge to Social Security, or they'll have some extra income coming in, so they won't be as much of a stress on the social safety net. So what we've seen so far is this is active in Oregon, California, Illinois, Connecticut, and Maryland. There are another half dozen states that are working to implement the programs, and across the country, we're seeing interest legislation in like 18 different states, even just in the last year. So I think we're very excited to see this kind of move forward.
Thank you, Kim. We can come back to you. First of all, I forgot to thank Raina, who really did organize this, so thank you so much. She deserves a round of applause, so thank you, Raina. Thank you. And I thank Ray Walton also, who's the, where is Ray? Well, he just wants to be thanked in absentia. So thank you, Ray. Susan, you're thinking of doing something like this in Minnesota. Could you just describe why you've allowed 14 states to go ahead of you?
Kathleen, that's a great question.
Yeah, I know that's not how you thought I would ask that question.
No.
Why are you being so innovative right now, Susan?
Well, we've actually been innovative since 2015, but the innovation has not led to anything, any product yet. But we have been looking at this, as I mentioned, since 2014, when, as part of some legislation known as the Women's Economic Security Act, we appropriated, that is, the legislature appropriated $400,000 to do a feasibility study. That did happen. We retained a contractor to do that study. And in 2017, the study was issued. At that point, Senator Sandy Pappas introduced a bill, which is similar to what we're currently working on. It's a bill that has both an auto IRA component and a multiple employment or multiple employer plan component. The point of the second component is to allow for some sort of vehicle where employers could contribute in addition to employees. As we all are learning and have been observing, the IRA program is only for employee contributions, employee payroll deduction contributions. So right now where we are is we are in our third iteration of a bill. We expect that it will be introduced in 2023 when our session begins on January 3rd. And then we will see what happens through the legislative process. I think the thing that's different with the upcoming session is that prior to this, we've had a divided legislature. So our Senate was majority GOP, the House was majority DFL. With November's election, that has flipped in the Senate. So we now have what we're calling a trifecta, a DFL governor, DFL Senate, and a DFL House. So there is some.
Don't know what the DFL is.
I'm sorry.
That probably means. What do you think that means?
It's the Democratic Farmer Labor Party, which is our counterpart to the Democratic Party.
Thank you very much. Democratic is what you
Yes.
mean. Yeah. Thank
Yes.
you. I just wanted. Everybody doesn't know all the names. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
That's great.
So that's where we are right now. We're hopeful that something will happen this session.
Perfect. Do you want to describe why what it is that why the auto IRA has been a requirement, and it works for about 70% of employers, and how much money do the employees that sign up make?
Sure.
I think the Pew has done some research about what's going on in Oregon. I thought it'd be interesting. And Michael, I know you're going to focus on portability, but if you want to jump in at any of the points on this, you're welcome to do so.
Sure. So, I mean, what we're seeing across the board is that these programs work, and it is, people are contributing. It's in small amounts, but it's because the demographic of people we're working with were people who weren't really being able to access savings previously. So many of them skew low income, like part-time workers. We have, people who just were, in jobs that didn't normally have this kind of ability to save. So I think the averages in Oregon right now are about $120, $130 a month. And the average amount of savings is somewhere around $1,500. In some of the other states, it's a little lower, but they've only been stood up in the last 2 to 3 years. So it takes a little bit of time to get those balances to get them up there. But I think what is really interesting about this population is that when they were opted into the program, about 70% of people stay and they keep saving. And then we're seeing that continue even after they get auto-escalated year after year. So we go from 5% to 6% to 7% on January 1st of every year. That population just keeps staying and keeps saving. So it shows you that it was not that people didn't have the ability to save. They were lacking the access, and they were worried to make these big financial decisions on their own, which I think is to Kathleen's earlier point about the defined benefit plans. People didn't have to make those decisions. They were just opted in, and that money was going to come their way no matter what. But in a DC defined contribution plan, you, the individual, have to decide how much am I saving, where am I saving it, what's a good percentage of the amount that I should save, how should that be invested, and all of those things, they cause people to just stop and say, I'd rather not make this big scary decision. I think I would rather not, and then you lose all of these years of compound interest just by not making the simple decision to start.
I think thank you, Kim. I find it very interesting that the average salary of people that who are contributing is between $29,000 and $34,000. So the people who are making who are contributing 5% of their salary are not making a lot of money, $29,000 to $34,000. And it shows that once people are given a chance to save, they want to save. And they'll do it when it's easy to make it save. Remember at the beginning, I'm going to repeat myself all the time. Make it easy to save. The defined benefit world simply took the money out of the paycheck and made it easy to save. So the auto IRA is saying to you, we'll take it out of your paycheck. We're going to make it easy for you to save. And that's why it works. Now, 30% are saying it's too much, but 70% are now saving. And altogether, isn't it over $500 million have been saved?
Yeah, over $500 million in 3 states.
So 14 states have passed it. 3 states have gone forward with it, and over $500 million is saved that would not have been saved had it not been for this program, the program that you envisioned many years before, Senator Harkin, and that you worked on, Michael. The point of this is, if you have an idea that makes things easy for people and makes it easy for people to save, they'll take advantage of it. It didn't require financial education. What it required was making it easy for people to save. And that's what we're trying to do, is to replicate the defined benefit plan as much as possible in a DC world. We can't replicate everything, but to the extent we can. You've also, I think, Kim, interviewed a number of businesses to ask them, has this been a burden for them? What have you found?
Right. Well, we did some work in Oregon and then again in Illinois to look at the employee and the employer experiences in these plans. And on the employer side, 80% of businesses said that there were no costs whatsoever. And the ones that, in the 20% that said there were costs, it was usually something small, like, it takes me a little bit more time to do my payroll because they have additional payroll lines, or maybe they took the time to, get a payroll service or hire someone to do that work. But in the end, it's still far, far less expensive and time-consuming than having their own plan. And we do know that many of these employers will eventually want to upgrade. I mean, many of the employers say we would love to give an employee match, and all the programs have to say we can't do that because we're IRAs. There's no way to do that. And so many of these players will eventually probably move on. But this is such a great basic program for employers to get their employees saving and to be able to offer something to their employees.
And I don't know if it's Pew. Did everybody understand that? I just want to make sure this audience is paying attention. Didn't 80% of the businesses said it did not cost them any more money, and the 20% said it was, or time, and only 20% just a little bit more. In fact, if you talk to AARP, they said they couldn't really point to how much more money it cost. The other interesting idea is that what did I don't know if it's Pew or AARP found how many businesses in California decided not to go into the auto IRA and decided to form their own 401k plan.
Right.
Do you have the statistics
Right,
on that?
that was also us. So we did an evaluation of Form 5500 filings, so I'm not going to go into what that is. You can always come talk to me or look at our website for that. But we basically were looking at private plan creation in Oregon, California, and Illinois in the year after they had their first deadline for the program. And when that happened, we saw if you took each of those years, the 1 year in Oregon, the 1 year in Illinois, and the 1 year in California, you compare those to the national average, there was a 35% increase in plan creation, private plan creation in those states after that deadline. So, we're not making a specific causal link yet because we want to see this kind of happen over time. But what this is telling us is that this is maybe a little even stronger than a nudge. Like we're giving employers a choice that says you have to either facilitate the state plan or you can go get your own plan. And many of them are saying, I guess this is the time and the place to get my own plan.
So Anne, when you hear that 35% of the number of businesses that form their own plan, which would mean that their employers would contribute to their employees' retirement, I would ask you, why would Minnesota find that they would have to create their own MEPs when it sounds like MEPs, that is, the private sector is going to create plans that will include contributions by the employer?
Kathleen.
Time.
Yeah, I think we are reconsidering the MEP.
Does everybody know what a MEP is? I didn't think so. I had never heard of a MEP till like a year ago. So, do you want to describe what a MEP is, Anne?
Susan.
Oh,
you
Susan.
must know my sister-in-law,
I'm sorry.
Anne.
Well, I don't know why I called you Anne. Clearly, I didn't do my homework. Susan, sorry about that.
That's all right. That's all right. So, a multiple employer plan is a plan that is centralized. So there is a sponsor that puts together essentially like a prototype, or at least that's the way Minnesota's program is set up. If we get there, there's a plan document, and it can then be adopted by employers. So they would fill out an adoption agreement with certain things that are variables that they can pick from, including an employer contribution, which could be a match or a discretionary contribution. They join the program, and then the funds will still go into the state. So it'll be invested at our state board of investment, in just like any other account, commingled funds, and they'd be invested. There also is the ability to have separate accounts set up, and those would then be able to be invested at the direction of the participants. So that's the way our MEP would work. But we, as I mentioned, we are wanting to go with the path of least resistance, I think, as we move forward here, and we'll probably not pursue the MEP aspect at this time and just focus on doing what other states have done, which is, the auto IRA.
Yeah, I want to point that out because 2 states have tried a MEP. Isn't that correct?
Massachusetts has a MEP for
Yeah.
a very small one for nonprofits, and Vermont's trying to stand one up.
Well, we did one of our roundtables was in Massachusetts, and they said they have a new treasurer. Beth Pierce was terrific, but she didn't run again
In Vermont.
Mm-hmm. And they said maybe the MEP is not, maybe perhaps another option would be to try the auto IRA. Mm-hmm. Anyway, I'm going to change the subject now. I think we've talked about auto IRAs, and we can come back to that if there are any questions about that, okay? So let's just say you've got some money. The question is, can you keep it? Okay? It's not just enough to actually have some money. Can you take the money? Now, I don't know if we have a chart, which I probably didn't provide for you. I wasn't always as competent as I should be. What?
Technical issue.
Oh, good. I'm glad to blame it on the Harkin Center, not on me. That's so mean of me to say, isn't it? But since I wasn't getting Susan's name wrong, you can see it would be easy enough to blame it on me. So just to give you a couple of facts, $92 billion is lost every year because people can't take their retirement from job to job. Has anybody ever heard that statistic before? Raise your hand if you have. 3 people. Okay, you can see it's a hidden statistic, which means when you get to the age of 60, the average American has lost 30% of their retirement because they can't take their retirement from job to job. I know I'm supposed to ask Michael this, but I'm talking because I'm so irritated at this problem. My son-in-law had $8,000 at one account, and it took him 15 hours to try to get the $8,000 to go from one account to another account. Do you think that's a good idea? Can I hear a little louder? No.
No.
Okay, yeah. Okay. You know what? See, you're not going to change policy if you're going to be quiet, right? You're just going to... Okay. Get the point. Okay. Now, I'm going to read a few of the reasons why people can't take their retirement from job to job. And then I'm going to turn this over to Michael, who's been working on this for a long period of time and has got a really good response. So look at him, because he's got a smile on his face, okay? One of the reasons why you can't take your retirement from job to job is because there's no requirement that your new employer has to take your retirement, okay? So that's one problem. The second reason is because when you have one kind of retirement, it could be called a Roth IRA. It's taxed in one way, and you're going to a new retirement, and it's taxed in a different way. And so the new employer says, well, how is it taxed? And they give you a lot of to-dos, and I ask a lot of questions, and they cause you a lot of trouble. That's the second reason. And they ask so many questions, they're exhausted. So when I went to the people at the Department of Labor, every 40-year-old had 4 different retirement plans on their desk that they had not consolidated, okay? I don't know if that's true of you, Taryn. Okay, 3. Thank you, Taryn. See, 3. She is under the average. Most of them had 4. You have done a good job, Taryn. These 40, that's the problem. 3, most people, if you have a job, automatically get the money into your bank account. Is that correct? Who gets a check anymore? Anybody raise their hand? Okay. If you get a retirement plan, they give it to you by check. It's the only group in the whole country that gives you a check and doesn't do it automatically. Isn't that irritating? Yes, Kathleen. Clearly, we need a little call and response in this audience. Well, you don't think I figured that out? Okay. I'm not going to go. I'm going to leave it at that. I think I've given you 3 good reasons, and the others are even more complicated, and I need a guy from AARP to explain it. Okay, Michael, what is your answer?
Yeah, so we've made kind of a trade-off in the country with our private retirement system. We've decided that we will opt for a decentralized system where every employer sponsors their own plan, and things are, with the exception of some of the state programs now, but every employer sponsors their own plan and runs it separately. And And there's lots of benefits to that. There's innovation, there's market forces that get injected to bring costs down. There's lots of benefits to that approach. But one of the detriments is that it's just not as simple for consumers and not as portable as something like Social Security, which is a national system. No one worries when they change jobs, when they go from employer 1 to employer 2, whether their Social Security benefits will be safe, whether they'll be carried over, whether they'll get credit from all their employers, because it just happens. In the private retirement system, it doesn't just happen. You save a little from, when you work from employer X, then when you go to employer Y, you may or may not bring your account with you. You may not be allowed to, as Kathleen said. It may be very difficult. And a huge portion of people cash out. Kathleen used the stat, about $92 billion leaks out of the retirement system, is withdrawn prior to retirement when people change jobs. And it's really inefficient. There are plenty of legitimate reasons people need their retirement savings early, medical emergencies, all kinds of things. But most of that is just because there's a lot of friction in the system. I do this for a living, and I've been doing it for almost 20 years. And I will tell you that when I last changed jobs, I had to spend hours getting my money to move. I had to go to a bank and get a special type of medallion guarantee stamp. And there's a lot of friction in the system. And what people do is they throw their hands up and just either don't move the money, they forget about it, they cash it out, and that leads to a lot of waste. So, how do we solve this? Because it is a real problem, and Mark will talk about lifetime income in a minute. You don't get to the stage of trying to produce income in retirement if you've got nothing to produce it from, right? That whole problem depends, and that the solutions there depend on people having enough savings to live off of. So, are there things we can do? Well, I mean, we could, Congress could clearly act and do something here, but without Congress doing anything, I think the private sector has started to address this in incremental steps. Recently, 3 of the largest service providers in the country announced what they're calling the Portability Services Network, something that's been in development for about almost a decade, that allowed these 3 service providers who run almost a majority of plans in the country to automatically move your money when you change jobs. So when you go from employer A to employer B, your money can follow you seamlessly and without any friction through a negative consent process. So you don't have to do anything for your small account to follow you from employer A to employer B. If you want to take your money, that's fine. You can opt out. But if you do nothing, your accounts will be consolidated. This will help reduce the number of people who lose accounts. It'll help build larger accounts. It'll reduce overall account fees, because if you've got 3 accounts and they all charge a fee, it's a lot better for you to consolidate them and bring that whole cost down. It's a huge step for the industry, and it's kind of it's years in the making. It will be transformative, not just for these small accounts that are the direct target here, but also just building the infrastructure to combine the nearly 600,000 retirement plans we have in the country into a more coherent and unified system, something we just, over the past 40, 50 years, we have not been able to do.
Thank you, Michael. And can you tell the audience some of the groups that are supporting this idea?
Yeah, I can. The 3 major record keepers that launched this are Fidelity Investments, Alight, and Vanguard. They provide record-keeping services. They provide
I was
services
talking about the Urban League, the NAACP.
And then those are the 3 that launched it and are the record keepers that do it. This endeavor is supported by folks like the NAACP and the National Urban League, and has bipartisan support in Congress as well. There's been supportive legislation introduced to facilitate this and provide some incentives by Senators Scott and Brown, a bipartisan coalition in the Senate. And then Schneider and Estes, is a bipartisan coalition in the House as well.
I wanted you to know, A, that this is a huge problem. Most people don't know about it because they've worked in the same job. Some people have worked in the same job. To tell you the truth, I had never heard about this issue till I joined the Department of Labor. And now I'm really sad that so many people lose their money. When they leave their job, you at least have kept it on your desk. You haven't consolidated. But they take it out. They have $100. They have $3,000. They don't know what to do with it, and they cash it out. They go on a vacation, they buy a new refrigerator, they buy a new car, and all that money gets lost, and therefore they're not being able to save for retirement, which they would if it was easy to keep it in the system. Remember, the whole idea is to make it easy. And what happens, I'm going to tell you, I was on a panel the other day. No, I wasn't on the panel. I was in the audience like you. And the 5 panelists said, oh, we need better education. No, we need it to be easier. So when everybody says it's your fault because you're not being educated, I say, no, the system should be easy for everybody, okay? So just remember that. I'm on a mission here. And the mission is make it easy for people. The defined benefit plan was easy for people. It could be easy if they put it in, if they had the better technology, if they required to take your money, if they didn't do it with checks. You get the point? If they had one piece of paper that's had all the information and they could just read the paper and they said, oh, this works. We're going to take the money, okay? So I'm just trying to remember part of this is President Biden and Marty Walsh want everybody to understand these things can be done if people know about it and advocate for it. Okay. And the reason the NAACP and the Urban League like what Michael is up to is because the people who get most hurt by this are people who don't have a lot of money, and they keep losing the money when they lose their job. Okay? Thank you. I mean, I know you're from Iowa. But you know what? We have to learn and, to advocate. Okay.
You're lucky we're not in Jersey. They throw batteries at you there. That's how I was raised anyway.
Well, somebody was telling me about how they knew when my father was in Peru, a lot of people threw apples and bananas and oranges at him, and he was just said, I'm glad they don't have better aim. Okay, now, so we've dealt with 2 of the issues, right? Make it easier to save. 2, make it easier to take your savings from job to job. What's the 3rd issue? Does anybody remember what the 3rd issue is? Woohoo! I don't know who said it, but you're correct. So the 3rd issue is lifetime income, and I'm just going to give you a brief intro, and then I'm going to ask Mark what we should do. Okay, Mark? Because Mark has all these, every time I talk to him, he gives me yet another idea. So the situation is this. When you had Social Security, Kilolo did such a great job describing, as the senator, the great advantage of Social Security. You could live as long as you want, and you still get a Social Security check, and it still goes up when inflation goes up. So you didn't have a longevity issue, and you didn't have an inflation issue. That is great. When you have an when you have a 401k, you get a lump sum of money, and you don't know how long you're going to live. So you don't know how you're going to spend that money. And you didn't go to financial school or whatever you're supposed to go to, so you don't know how to spend it. And as a result, because the Department of Labor doesn't want me to say this, but you can just imagine that because you have this pot of money and it's not spread out, seniors in the United States has 5 times the amount of scams as Europe. Really? Yes, really. Okay, that's the end of that conversation. We're going to do a whole thing. That would be a great idea for the Harkin Institute, is to do something about elderly scams.
Encouraging or discouraging?
That would be a real... Michael, it's your former employer. I don't know what you're interested in. So that's number one. Second of all, the studies of studies have shown that 80% of Americans, seniors, don't know, are nervous about how to spend that money. Remember, this is only half of Americans. This is the half of Americans who actually do have a retirement. 80% makes them nervous about how to spend that money. And when they're nervous about how to spend that money, that stress causes cognitive decline. You can also do a study about that. I'm filled with suggestions for other people. The senator neglected to say I'm the oldest of 11 children, and I'm accustomed to telling people what to do. Anyway, so there are a number of things that could be done that would make it easier to turn this lump of sum money into lifetime income. Right, Mark?
Correct.
Okay, so Mark is with the group of actuaries. I don't know if that's the correct name.
I'm with I volunteer with a bunch of different actuarial organizations.
Yes, and actuaries, does everybody know what actuaries do? Okay, great. So,
and my focus really has been over the last decade on this challenge of lifetime income. When I first became an actuary, I was working with defined benefit plans. That was 40 plus years ago. That has changed. So I think this has been perfectly framed. I like to think of this as a step stool with three different landings. The first one is access. And if we can get that access, which also includes, I think, good investment choices. And then you can go to the next level. How do we keep money in the system? And then, of course, the third is now you've got money in the system. Now it's time to retire. What do you do with that money? And in the DB world, there were really very few decisions to be made. There were some, but not a whole lot. In the DC world, it is defined contribution world. It is totally different. It would be nice if all employer plans of all 401k and other defined contribution plans focused on this aspect of the retirement security challenge. That is, when somebody's ready to retire, they would offer different types of retirement income choices. Now, this could be a range. There's something as simple as buying an insured annuity so that whatever money you have goes to an insurance company and you get a lifetime income, but that doesn't work for everybody. There are also different types of what we call withdrawal strategies, where you can take out X dollars per month, then it'll last as long as the money lasts. It's not going to guarantee lifetime income, but it can be adjusted periodically to account for living longer or for investment changes. Or there is what we call minimum required distribution payouts. Well, whatever it is, and there are many others I can discuss, but the bottom line is that the money is there, it's in the retirement plan, and this would be part of the transition, going from accumulation to deaccumulation and doing it within a plan. Now, why is it good within a plan? Well, employers generally, employers are fiduciaries. That means whatever they do, they have to act in the best interest of the plan participants. Employers, because they have a lot of money, have access in the plan. They can get much better pricing, whether it's investment pricing or insurance product pricing, and they also have better expertise in terms of being able to hire experts that can help to come up with different retirement payout strategies. Problem is several. Mostly large employers will consider this, but very, very few small employers want to go down this road. You know, if you got 50 or 100 employees, you have a couple of people retire a year. This is not something you want to get involved with. In addition, there's, the more you do in a plan, there's more fiduciary liability. So you don't want small employers just are not going to jump on this ship. But probably the biggest issue here is that most retirement money is not in defined contribution plans. It's in IRAs and rollover IRAs. And I think I just heard somebody ask, how much money is that? Well, there's $11.7 trillion that is in IRAs. There's 9.3 in defined contribution plans. And as I said, a lot of that money is in small plans. So if larger employers start adopting these programs, that would be great, but it's still not going to provide a way for people with money in IRAs or people who are coming from small plans to be able to achieve some sort of lifetime income. And that's really where the challenge is. Now, people can use IRAs, IRA rollovers, but many people who service IRAs are not fiduciaries, which means they don't have to act in the best interest of their clients. They can sell them products that really are not properly suited for their situation, even though they claim that they are. And there's not necessarily good pricing that you get with big accounts. And a lot of IRA custodians really are not experts on retirement income. Most will either sell insurance or manage investments, and their arguments for having a combination of both insurance, annuities, and investments as part of a retirement income strategy. So what are the options here? Well, it would be good to get more employers to offer this. That might be achieved through a safe harbor, which I don't know if the DOL has the authority to do, but certainly Congress has the authority to do it, that would say, hey, if you do this, you can go ahead. And if you pay out income options, we're going to reduce your liability. But probably the bigger answer, because of all the IRA money and small plans, is going to have to be through some sort of what I'm going to refer to as an exchange.
Is it what?
And that is when somebody retires and they have money in an IRA or they have money in a plan and that plan doesn't offer retirement income, there will be this entity that will be registered, that will be fiduciaries, where people could move their money and have some core payout choices made available to them. Probably not very different in concept than the ACA exchange for health insurance for people who did not have insurance in their plan or otherwise, with their company or otherwise. So this could be one approach that could be used to expand retirement income options to people who don't get the right kind of advice elsewhere. And this would really mostly benefit those who need the expertise themselves the most. I can go on for hours, but I'm not going to, Kathleen.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank Mark because Mark gave us very innovative ideas. And I've been to a number of conferences about lifetime income, and he's pushing the envelope in ways that other people haven't. I'm going to give you two other ideas. I'm going to give you about three other ideas now, and then I'm going to let you, how sweet of me, to ask questions, okay? But his idea of doing something like the ACA, setting up a system where you can buy lifetime income options, is a very interesting idea. Right now, if you think about lifetime income, it's basically what I would call, and please correct me, just so you know, whenever I talk to Mark, he corrects me. So he's welcome to do that now, okay? Right now, lifetime income products are primarily retail products. Somebody comes to you and sells you a 200-page product, which is very, I think, difficult to understand. Part of my goal is to find the Steve Jobs of lifetime annuity. Really easy to understand on one page, okay? Easy, beautiful, lovely, nice to see, nice to understand. A wholesale product rather than a retail product, Okay, so that's one way of thinking it, and that's sort of what you're describing as well. For $100,000, I will get $500 a month for the rest of my life. It's actually $600. Somebody at Boston College did the math and said for $100,000, you get $600 for the rest of your life. Okay, something very easy to understand. That's not inflation. It's not as good as Social Security. It's not inflation protected, but it is something. That's one idea. Second idea, if you wait till you're 80, because what your real danger is longevity, you can say, I'm going to pay $50,000 and it's going to protect me for however long I'm going to live, because each of you in this room are going to probably live to 100 or 95 because you're educated, you're in this room, which means I can tell you a lot of things, what it means about you. And you're going to live a long time. So what you're most worried about, unless you're lucky enough to have worked at probably a university, you don't have a defined benefit plan, and you want to make sure that you're protected for longevity risk, okay? So that's the second thing. Now, the third idea, which I have a friend, which one of these days you're going to explain it to me in greater detail, would be a retirement bond that the federal government could issue, which would have protection, longevity protection, as well as inflation protection, which would mean you could sell it and it would be fungible. So those are three other ideas. If we were a year from now, I would have a much better description, and I would do a better job of describing all of those ideas, just so you know. But we're only at the beginning of this retirement plan.
Kathleen, can I just give me 1 minute?
What?
Just 1 minute. So I agree.
Yeah.
And the idea of an exchange would be to offer
Yeah.
different alternatives, like you just said.
Yeah.
But there's one other alternative I have to mention,
Yeah,
because
absolutely. Go right
Senator
ahead.
Harkin was the one who basically threw it out with his USA retirement funds.
Oh, yeah.
And that is that when payouts would occur, they would be based upon some sort of longevity pooling among the individuals,
Right.
which would almost act like a DB plan or Social Security, and that would enhance payouts. We see them here in the United States only with church plans and some state plans.
Oh, yes, church funds and
all
what the
over
wide,
world.
and what the, yes, I think that's a really good point. And one other thing I would say that I learned just last week, it's the great thing about going and doing these, when you get your statements about how much money you have, rather than say you have this much in bonds and this much in equities and this is what it's worth, the statement would say only you have this will produce X amount in your retirement. So you would get accustomed to thinking all your money produces X amount of income, so that you think of things in terms of income rather than things in terms of lump sum payments. Because right now, the way we think is like a house. This is your house rather than this is your income. So you think, I have $50,000 worth of equities, let's just say, of Apple stock. I'm making that up. Rather than thinking, my Apple stock will produce $100 a month for me. So do you understand? So I'm trying to get people to think differently. Okay? Do you get it? Yes. Woohoo! Go Iowa. Yes. Okay, so we have a few minutes. Does anybody want to ask questions?
Take questions from here, from the audience, and then I just wanted to read this for our online audience.
Sure,
we
sure,
have
sure.
Google Voice, and you can text your question to 515-346-8587, and then one of our students will pass questions on to me. But we can take questions from the audience.
And just so you know, we still have two of our great panelists from the morning on Social Security. So I'm pulling them in. They are really great and smart, so I'm not going to limit to us. Yes.
maybe a question for Mark, but like with the 401k, does the 4% rule that people have talked about for years, does the 4% rule for withdrawals still work?
The 4% rule for withdrawals works depending upon the actuarial assumptions you assume in your calculations. So to answer the question, we don't know. But you could certainly come up, if you assume a certain rate of return and a certain inflation, it works. Now, nowadays, they're using much lower rates of return on the assumption that future investments are not going to earn as much as they did in the past. But, you know, I just don't think it's that simple a question. I would not tell people to rely on the 4% rule. I happen to think that, you know, what Kathleen talked about makes the most sense. I believe people should be able to have easy to use alternatives, which probably for the first 15 years pay out some income based upon their investment balance, but then switch over to a longevity annuity or a QLAC, which provides long-term protection. If you live very long, they're a lot less expensive than regular annuities.
Sure, in the back.
My question is around, so you have the auto IRA. Is there also a effort to be Roth auto IRA?
They are Roth.
They are.
Yeah. Yes.
When I graduated from college, I think I'm like most young, I was like most young people, and I remember my first job in the private sector, I had, at that time I thought he was an old man, but probably told me that I should, one of the things I should do is, our company had a matching plan, savings plan, that I should join it. I didn't, because good grief, I was just 22, and I was going to live forever, and I was going to work for a long, long time, so I didn't. I got an education, IFRS was automatically deducted, and I'm so glad it was. So the program that they've talked about these other states, does Iowa have anything like that, so that, because most young people probably don't automatically put themselves in something like that?
Can I answer that question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, so that's a wonderful question. So originally on this panel, we had Treasurer Mike Fitzgerald, who unfortunately did not win his reelection. He had proposed legislation for a state auto IRA, and it just hasn't moved forward. Possibly similar reasons as Minnesota, but we have opportunities to build coalitions, and that's why we also have the event today, to really educate people about all of those programs that are happening around the country and what they are adding to the retirement savings. And I just wanted to make sure that that was actually originally intended to be part of the conversation, Kim. But if you want to add anything to that.
No, and what I'll add is I think that like constituent voices are very important in retirement savings policy, because it's just not the sexiest thing, and people don't really tend to show up in there.
Excuse me, Kim. We are intending to make it sexy.
Okay, we're working on it. We're working on it. But for the most part, people like to not think about that, because it's far off. It's future me, and it's a little scary because you're just not sure what's going to happen, right? So I think for the most part, people when they go to advocate, or they go to talk to their senator or their congressman or their like local representatives, this is not something that often gets a lot of constituent voices. So if it is something that interests you, and you're willing to do that, I think it would add a lot to the conversation in terms of getting these kinds of bills moving.
Yeah, you, and then you, and then you. Okay.
So I have one comment and then one question. So my comment to your issue is, if we could somehow, and this is serious, if we could turn it into a video game of some sort, with different levels, like silver level, gold level, boosters, we probably could get kids interested in it, but it would take some real work, I think.
What would be the video game?
Well, it would be, we would turn this whole, like, contribution system into a video game.
Yeah, that would be very clever.
There's something to that, because I hate working out, but man, Peloton, they really did something special with that. And, the gamification gets me on that bike at least 5 times a week. So yeah, I think it.
I mean, I shouldn't say too much about this, but we've been thinking about this at IPER. So if the question is how do you recruit new teachers
Right.
and use IPERS as one of the benefits, like, say, well, who cares? But if we could somehow turn it into a brand or a video game, I bet it could be done. So we're thinking about it. I don't know.
Well, I would think some of those people like Fidelity and Vanguard have the money to do that.
Yeah, I mean, maybe. So the question I have on the auto IRA thing, has anybody thought about, or is any state looking at an auto DB sort of structure? And I assume the answer is no, but if it is no, what's the barrier that?
It's expensive because the DB plan worked when people didn't work for the same company for 50 years. The auto IRA, they're allowed to get out.
I think one of the challenges, there was a bill proposed in California in 2010, 12 for a DB plan, an auto IRA, but with a defined benefit component. One of the challenges is just federal law has a lot of prohibitions and restrictions in it that limit what states can do. And so states haven't been able to experiment as much as they could in the absence of the federal impediments. And that's been a problem. And we've kind of gravitated towards the auto IRA approach, which works to try and get around a lot of those federal impediments. It's just, states' hands are somewhat tied.
I mean, because we right now.
Can I just say, the idea of an auto DB, the problem is that in a defined benefit plan, there is potential unknown liability. So if you're going to have a whole bunch of people join a group, and then all of a sudden the investment returns are not so great, or people live longer than you expect, there may not be enough money to pay the guaranteed benefit. Where's that money going to come from?
So we have the same problem in the public plan. We have 1,500 employers, and even though they're public sector, it's the exact same issue.
Except
Yeah,
that
well,
you have the taxpayers.
What?
You have the taxpayers.
They can.
Right, but let's,
I just said, well, you answered the question.
I think,
Let's do one last question. And
well, how about, there were 2 more. Who were the other one? Yes?
Actually, young graduates are asking those questions these days. All firms that are here in the Midwest have a difficult time competing with the
You're completely correct.
take, for instance, architecture. 90% of the architectural firms in the state of Iowa have less than 5 employees. And it's very difficult for them if they can't come up with some kind of auto-save formula.
Get them to tell,
compete with the big boys.
they should go and, well, I can't say that. You can say it.
They should go lobby, is what you're saying? Yeah. No, I mean, again, I think back to the original point that I was making. If we had the more constituents get out there and say this is an important thing and we want to see retirement benefits for everyone as opposed to just, being lucky to be with an employer that offers one, the more likely that you'll see state bills be successful.
Yes?
I believe the Wall Street Journal editorial said it's not up to the federal government to guarantee income for citizens. Why? The question is, has any of the groups tried to counter that Wall Street Journal editorial position? What has been your response to attacks, arguments similar to the one made by the Wall Street Journal editorial?
Well, first of all, this group is not guaranteeing anybody an income for life. We are saying, if you save and invest in the in the private sector, over 40 years, the returns traditionally have gone up. That's what's happened. That's why the pension funds of why people invest in pension. That's why we have investments in the New York State pension funds, the CalPERS, GM, Ford, over 40 years. That doesn't mean the stock market goes up every year. It goes down, as you know, sometimes. But because our economy grows, the stock market grows. Not every year, but it does over 40 years, and therefore you're going to do better. And that's our faith. And if you do it internationally, the world grows. So that's why it's a good idea. I mean, that's my argument, and it doesn't work every day. It doesn't work every 3 years, but it works over a 40-year period, which might be your lifetime of work.
The Wall Street Journal editorial board has a lot of very unpopular opinions, and I'd say that is one of them. When there were attempts to privatize Social Security in 2006, it wasn't Democrats that stopped that. It was constituents contacting their Republican legislators who were in charge of Congress, and it was those Republicans who said no to the administration's proposal.
And it was because, I'm going to tell you the story. I talked to Senator Markey. So Senator Markey was saying, well, do you want to do a tranche into the Social Security? If you the top 10% of Social Security into the stock market. Oh, no, that's not what they were looking for. They wanted individual accounts in which they could charge high fees per individual. That's a very different thing than doing like the sovereign wealth funds around the world. So it was not, do we want to go into the stock market? It's, do we want to make money off individual fees? I want to distinguish between those two arguments.
Thank you. We can close.
I'm sure that's what you wanted to hear. Oh, do I want to? Raina wants to know, do you want to close, Kathleen? Do you think that was a hint? Probably. Anyway, Senator Harkin, can I thank you for being such a leader throughout your career? You won eventually the congressional seat, then you won the Senate seat, and when you won, you maintained your interest in helping people in ADA, in Social Security, in savings. Every time you were there for working people. Thank you, Senator Harkin. And I want to thank you that we are lucky to be here today in the Harkin Institute. And when Secretary Walsh came back, he was so thrilled to be in your presence and at your institute. Thank you so much. We are so lucky to be here.
Reciprocate and thank you. You have been there forever on this issue. Now, as I said, we're the 10th state you've been in, and I know that President Biden and Marty Walsh place a lot of faith in you to kind of get through all of this, and hopefully you can make some good recommendations on the pathway forward with a new Congress. I don't know. We'll see. But thank you for what you've done.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen. Thank you, panelists.
Thank you, Sue.
This was lovely.
Thank you, everyone.
And thank you, great panel. Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Mike. Thank you. I didn't get to talk. Good luck in Minnesota. We'll talk tomorrow on Friday.
Thank you.
Thanks for a great audience.